What's good, everybody? Welcome to the Pull Up and Chat. My name is BJ Mathews, aka B Jizzle. Before we get started, follow us on the YouTube page, the Pull Up Basketball Podcast, as well as Spotify, Iheartradio, the Pull Up Basketball Podcast. Follow us on our Twitter and TikTok, the Pull Up Basketball Podcast, as well as Instagram, my Instagram, B Jizzle, BJIZZLE. Follow my co-host at RickMasters23. Follow us on Instagram at _the Pull Up _. Like, share, subscribe all of our YouTube videos. Hit that notification bell by the subscribe button as well to get all of our updated content. Let's get it popping. All right, check it out. So this video is a little bit long overdue. It's going to be very detailed, but it's also going to be very engaging. I want you guys to really sit back and relax and, take a seat and pull up to about what I'm about to say on this video, because I have a mouthful to say. And I just want y'all to really relax. I'm going to keep y'all engaged and I'm going to keep y'all interested. So, here we go. So I like to watch different sports shows every morning. My sports shows like Undisputed, First Take, First Things First, here and there, Jalen Jacoby as well. But this is probably my most favorite sports called Speak for Yourself with Marcellus, Wiley, and Emmanuel Acho, right? You guys can't see him on the list, but y'all can look him up. Speak for Yourself is probably the best sports show in my opinion. I like to watch these sports shows to get different topics and, prepare for the shows for you guys to give y'all great content, top of the line. So they had an interesting segment on Kobe Bryant. Everybody understands the All-Star game was just this past week. They had a top 75 anniversary team where they had the top 75 best players of all time, according to, the NBA top anniversary team list. But this is the top 10 players right here. You guys can see the list right here, who they choose to rank as the top players in the NBA. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Larry Bird, Tim Duncan, Oscar Robertson, Kobe Bryant, right? Everybody has, how they rank their list. Basically how I rank my top 10 lists and, things of that nature, top 20 all-time lists, I rank them by these criterias. First thing I rank them by is your championships. How many championships did you win? And what was your finals record? When we talk about, championships, we talk about Jordan, Bill Russell, Kobe having to win. And then we talk about, how LeBron has, lost championships. That's the first thing that we talk about before anything. We talk about your championships. How many championships did you win? And what was your finals record? The second thing we talk about, in my opinion, I talk about is dominance. How did you dominate your era? Were you one of the two top players in the league? Did you lead your team? Were you the guy that, was revered as the best player in the world by, the masses? That's who I look at. I look at your dominance. How did you dominate? I look at your accomplishments and accolades, MVPs, finals MVPs. I look at your, all defensive team, all NBA teams, defensive player of the years, things of that nature. Those are the top awards I look at when I talk about awards and accolades. Then I look at the other, subpart categories, stuff like stats. Stats are very important, but for the most part, these guys are, cream of the crop. So they're pretty much averaging stats. That's not a problem. Some may average a few more, points or a few more assists, a few more rebounds. But all in all, these are their all-star numbers, superstar numbers, cream of the crop. But then I also look at your competition. That's another big one. I look at your competition. Who did you face, right? Your era that you played in. I look at the, assistants that you had on your team. Did you have super teams? Did you have, a lot of help on your team? I look at that. That has to be factored in when we talk about it because, different eras, have different playing styles and different competition, and we have to factor that in. And then, of course, I look at your skills and abilities. I look at your skills, what you were able to do on the court, your abilities. Just like any, person that's getting signed to a deal, they don't just, pick up a piece of paper and say, hey, these stats are what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and sign this player. No, you go watch them at a combine. You go watch them at a draft camp. You go watch them at a game with your eyes, the eye test. So what can you do on the court? Shooting, dribbling, passing. Can you play both ways? Are you able to lead your team? Are you have leadership skills? Are you a dominant player? Those are the categories we look at, right? So now that we got that out the way, this pertains to Kobe Bryant. Listen, I have no problem with people having their opinions about what they feel who should be in their top 5, top 10, as long as it's consistent, as long as it's logical. Because I have to say this. When we start talking about Kobe Bryant, should he be in the top 10 or should he be ranked higher or whatever? I just don't understand where this conversation, well, actually, I do know where this started at. It started off in 2014 where Kobe Bryant called out ESPN for being a bunch of idiots for ranking him, as after the 40th best player in the NBA after his Achilles injury and, multiple injuries. His body just betrayed him. He called out ESPN for ranking him so low in the rankings. That's where all this stuff started with. Then you started seeing all these lists with Sports Illustrated not having Kobe in his top 10, having guys like Steph Curry and David Robertson in front of Kobe, which I thought was ridiculous because, let's just be honest, Steph Curry's not even finished playing yet. I mean, he's the best shooter of all time, arguably one of the greatest little men of all time with Isaiah Thomas, but it's a big difference from being the best three-point shooter from being the best player. And I think people are starting to realize that with Steph Curry, as dominant as he is, his size does somewhat, kind of put him on shackles when you compare him to these guys on this list who are, pretty much 6'6" and up. Oscar Robertson, I think, was 6'5", but for the most part, these are, wings and centers and forwards, you know what I'm saying? So Steph Curry, I mean, it's levels to this. And then David Robinson, to me, yes, he has 3 championships and an MVP, but just by the totality of his career, I don't think you can make a case that David Robinson is ahead of Kobe, but that's what they did, right? So, okay. These lists, when these lists started coming out, I feel like the NBA fan base really started, running with it, because I don't think most NBA fans do enough research. I think they just look at the TV and watch what they watch. They hear what they hear, and then they just run with the narrative. That's why I was so perplexed that, you asking this question. Like, for the majority of Kobe's career, when he was playing, when he was healthy, he was regarded as one of the top 2 players in the NBA. Right? From pretty much from 2001 all the way to about 2013, for an entire decade, he was considered at least a top 5 player, and in my eyes, a top 3 player. This is my era. I watched Kobe. The people that watched Kobe understood what they saw. Even the people that were older and younger knew what they saw when they watched Kobe Bryant. You know what I'm saying? But I think, him going out the way he did and having them injuries, people, that's how they viewed him. But you got to view him when he was actually healthy and then before the Achilles injury. So the tenure that he had of dominance, factors into my list. But the thing with Kobe, to me, is people keep changing their minds. They keep changing their minds with Kobe. At first it was, this man needed Shaq to win a championship. They won that three-peat in 2000 to 2002. Then Shaq had to leave, and then, he wins a championship that he accomplishes that with Pau Gasol. Well, then it became, he needed Pau Gasol to win a championship, which I was completely shocked, because my whole thing is, you giving Pau more credit for being the second banana than Kobe being the second banana. Like, let's get something straight. Kobe Bryant was a better second banana to Shaquille O'Neal than Pau Gasol was a better second banana to Kobe Bryant. So I just found it very funny that we're ready to give Pau Gasol this credit as if Kobe needed Pau Gasol to win, but Shaq didn't need Kobe to win, even though he was way more impactful with Shaq. And even this, to be honest, the second part of that three-peat, or that first peat, like from 2001 to 2002, you can make a case that Kobe Bryant was just as impactful as Shaquille O'Neal. The only problem is that people look at those finals MVPs, which is only one round, and say, okay, well, Shaq was just always more impactful than Kobe. But in reality, there were a lot of times that Kobe actually was just as impactful in those playoff series against Sacramento, Portland, and San Antonio. But the only reason we can't give them credit is because they don't give MVPs for playoffs. So, people just say finals MVP, Shaq won 3. Oh, he was just head and shoulders over Kobe, which he was, a little more dominant in his prime, but Kobe pulled his weight. And just to kind of, back that point up, Shaq had Penny Hardaway, he had Kobe Bryant, and he had Dwayne Wade. He came up with 4 championships, right? And Kobe came up with 5. So Kobe and Shaq needed each other to win. But we want to take his championships away in that three-peat, and we want to say that Pau Gasol was responsible. Well, we needed Pau to win. Yeah, he needed Pau to win. Pau was an upgrade from Kwame Brown, but Pau Gasol was in the top 3 power forward. At that time, it was Kevin Garnett, Tim Duncan, and Dirk Nowitzki. Pau Gasol went to 1 All-Star game in his 7-game stint in Memphis. He was a good power forward, but let's be honest, and I think Pau will admit this too, He was a skilled center, a skilled power forward who was looked at as being soft. In that '08, championship against the Boston Celtics, just the truth, that Celtics front line with KG and Kendrick Perkins and Glenn Davis somewhat bullied Pau Gasol, somewhat intimidated him. Kobe, being who he wasn't going to allow that on his watch. So what he did, he toughened Pau Gasol up. And then even like Paul Pierce alluded in that All the Smoke podcast with Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes, he said that Kobe toughened him up. And then you saw a different Pau Gasol in 2010, and, the rest is history. So we're not talking about Pau Gasol if Kobe didn't have that leadership towards him. But now the discussion is, well, we can't have Kobe Bryant in because of his efficiency numbers, which I guess it's good to have good efficiency, but for me, that again is reaching for straws. Because if we just look at Kobe Bryant's efficiency numbers, he shot 44% from the field. And Kobe Bryant wasn't a shooting problem with him. It was a shot selection problem. Kobe Bryant is the greatest tough shot maker of all time. What we mean by that, he took a lot of bad shots. That's a fact. And even with him taking them bad shots, he's still shooting 44% from the field. That means there were many games that he would shoot over 50%. So it wasn't the fact that Kobe Bryant wasn't a great shooter or he couldn't shoot the ball. It was the fact that of his shot selection, how he shot the ball, made it difficult to hit shots. If he was able to take more calculated shots, his field goal percentage would go up. And as a matter of fact, he was in the most physical era in the 2000s. This is when I say I got to go back to context, and this is when I say people have to do their homework. That 2000 era with Kobe Bryant was the most physical defense of all time. Now, people can dispute that with the 90s. That 2000 era was the most physical defense of all time, right? That's when you had an era with those teams scoring 70 points. That tells you the defense was just strapped in the paint. It was hard to score your baskets. And even then, with all those restraints, Kobe scored at a 44% career field goal average. And we got to factor in all the injuries he had to go through in his last 3 years. So all those shackles on him, he shot 44%. That's not a deal breaker to say he can't be in the top 5 or top 10. But let me just get into this situation. Let me just go through this list. They got Oscar Robertson in front of Kobe Bryant. Now, first of all, let me say this. First of all, they got Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell. And here's my deal with Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell. I don't particularly like this, and Acho said this in the segment as well. He said he doesn't like ranking these guys because he didn't really see them play. I agree with that. Basically, the game was different back then. In the 60s and partially of the 70s when Wilt was playing. It was very different back then. You know what I'm saying? The rules were different. The players in the league were different for the most part back then, and it was just a new, different era with, a new time era. You know what I'm saying? So it's hard for me to really put them that they're in a category of their own. The Pioneers, Mr. Russell, Mr. Chamberlain, they're in a category of their own. It's hard to rank them with the modern day era from the 80s and beyond. You know what I'm saying? So kind of the same thing with Oscar Robertson, but I'll give Oscar Robertson, a hit because basically he was an undersized guard. It was much easier for Wilt and Bill to dominate at that time. So I usually take them off my, when I rank my players, I don't really put them in there. So Oscar Robertson, look, the thing that's been remembered about him is basically the triple-double stat. I know he had 12 All-Stars and an MVP, I think in 65, but that's the main thing we, rank him because he was a Mr. Triple-Double. That's not enough for me to put him over Kobe with all he did. As far as the consistency that Kobe had with the accomplishments, the stats, the skills and abilities that he had, the championships that he had, it's not enough to propel him over Kobe Bryant. I mean, if you look at Russell Westbrook, he's averaged, triple-double 3 seasons in a row, but nobody's going to put him over Kobe they're not going to put Russell Westbrook over Steph Curry because of the triple-double stat. And I'm not finna put Oscar Robertson over Kobe Bryant because he, was the Mr. Triple-Double. He's the first to do it. I mean, I'm sorry. That's just not enough with all due respect. Tim Duncan is at 8. Look, Acho brought this point up too. He felt like Tim Duncan is the most underrated superstar of all time, and I agree with that. I think with Tim is that basically that Spurs team was, a boring team, and people kind of, forget how great that Spurs team was and consistency. It doesn't take away from, what he brought to that team. 5 championships. I think somewhere around, I don't know, 15 all defensive teams or 15 all NBA, something crazy like that. He has like 15 all defensive teams, Tim Duncan. So what it was is that basically he was able to flourish with a system that Greg Popovich, made for him, and he was able to, put him with the teammates that he had around him. Tim Duncan was the ultimate leader. Like, you wanted to play with Tim Duncan. So that factors in why we put him so high in the top 10 list, and he's the greatest power forward of all time. But when it comes to ranking him with Kobe, here's the thing. They both have the same championships. As far as accomplishments, you can actually say that Tim had a little bit more than Kobe. There are certain things that, Tim Duncan had that Kobe didn't. Like those all-defensive teams, Kobe had 12. I think Tim Duncan had 15. Tim Duncan had an MVP, and Kobe had 1, which I'm going to get into later as well, how Kobe Bryant, you can make a strong case that he should have won 2 more MVPs because the player that won it said he was the best player in the league at that time. But I'm going to get into that later. Tim Duncan basically was the art of perfection and consistency. But when we talk about him against Kobe, this is why I go against competition. We got to look at, all my criteria. The competition, when they faced each other, Lakers and the Spurs, in the 2000s, I think the Lakers beat them, if I'm not mistaken, 3 out of 4 times. So it was sheer dominance from the Lakers when they would face the Spurs. When Kobe faced against Tim Duncan in 2008, after that 2007 finals that the Spurs won, the Lakers pretty much beat them when Kobe actually had a team around him. And as far as what he can do on the court, Kobe Bryant, just being a guard himself, a wing player can just do more than a big man. I mean, you're kind of limited as a big man to do as much. You got to have somebody give you the ball. You're not able to really control the system. Tim Duncan pretty much excelled at what he did, which is basically able to kick out the double teams, able to, play smart, bring the elevation of his other guys. Like I said, if you want to look at Tim Duncan saying his career, his resume was consistent, okay, fine. But as far as who was the more spectacular player and who actually got the better of the two when they faced each other, it was Kobe. So that's why I have to give the edge to Kobe Bryant. He was just a more spectacular player and a better individual player than Tim Duncan, and he has the same number of championships. So he got the most out of his team just as much as Tim Duncan. But before I continue going, I want to talk about something that Marcellus did, and I'm glad that Acho caught this. Marcellus tried to basically disregard defense. Basically saying that defense, we don't rank top players based off of defense. We talk about offensive and abilities, which I don't understand how Wiley could have said something like that, because basically basketball is played 2 ways. I mean, he tried to make the analogy with football pertaining to a running back. Problem is that running backs don't play defense. Basketball is played both ways, so you have to amplify defense. You know what I'm saying? When they made the case, when Acho said that Tim Duncan was the underrated player of all time, he had all the defensive teams, Marcellus agreed and nodded his head. You know what I'm saying? When he brought up the point that, Tim Duncan won 5 championships in 3 different eras, they took that as a positive. Wiley nodded his head. But when Acho brought up the point that Kobe won 3 championships with Shaq and then turned around and won 2 more with Pau Gasol, and I believe a 5 or 6 month gap, or I'm sorry, an 8-month gap, then they made it seem like basically that that was so bad. Kobe Bryant has 3-peated and went back to back. Those Spurs team with Tim Duncan never went back to back. So that just shows you the dominance that Kobe had when it was around his time period. But this is, again, what's going on is they're trying to take away things from Kobe. This is what the Masters have tried to do, take away things from Kobe. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's amazing to me that we keep talking about how Kobe had Shaquille O'Neal, but we don't talk about how Magic Johnson had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and we rank Kareem Abdul-Jabbar higher than we do Shaquille O'Neal. What's funny is Shaquille O'Neal's not even on this top 10 anniversary list. And neither is Hakeem Olajuwon, which I think is ridiculous. But I guess when you add in those two pioneers, I mean, that's why you got to take Hakeem out. But even then, Hakeem is the most skilled center of all time. But that's another discussion. Shaquille O'Neal's not even on this list. But we want to talk about Kobe having Shaq for 3 championships. We want to talk about Magic having Kareem for 5 championships. I mean, I just don't understand it. That's just the master trying to take things away from Kobe. But I digress from that. You have to put in defense when it comes to ranking these top 10 players. And when we talk about Larry Bird, Kobe Bryant was the better two-way player than Larry Bird. Kobe Bryant had 5 championships to Larry Bird's 3. Larry Bird did have 3 MVPs in 3 years. Larry Bird was a better rebounder and assister than Kobe Bryant. Larry Bird did turn around the Boston Celtics team in his first year from a 24-win team to, I think, a 50-win team, which is probably the best case a person has for Larry Bird over Kobe. But even then, just as an individual player, Kobe playing both ways and both sides of the ball, having more championships, having a more offensive skill game, I would take Kobe Bryant over Larry Bird as far as individual player. Right? I would take him over Larry Bird. So, to each is his own with that one, but I'll take Kobe Bryant over Larry Bird just by that simple factor. Now, I'm going to get to Magic in a minute. Actually, I'm going to get to him right now. Like I said, Acho did a good job as far as making his points, but I don't feel like he went far enough. I think that the amount of disrespect towards the people who's taking Kobe off this list and try to, erase history should be as loud as the person who did the disrespect by not even putting Kobe Bryant in the top 5, let alone, God forbid, oh my God, it's the top 10. Because it's obviously there's something going on. That's how I know it's not all about basketball. They've been trying to write Kobe Bryant out ever since 2008, 2009, when they tried to, make LeBron James as the face of the NBA. LeBron James was losing Eastern Conference playoff matchups to teams like Orlando and Boston when they tried to make that finals matchup between Kobe and LeBron in 2009, 2010 with the puppet show, and LeBron James couldn't hold his side of the bargain. They've been trying to write Kobe Bryant out since. And yet again, Kobe Bryant was able to win those 2 championships. And they were forced to tell the real story that Kobe was still the best player in the league at that time. So they've been trying to write him out for a long time. Guys like Acho need to really dig it in and actually put it to these people who are actually trying to disrespect his legacy. Like I said, Magic Johnson, here's the thing about Magic. Going back again, Magic Johnson, I know he saved basketball back in the 80s with Larry Bird. I know he's the greatest point guard of all time. I know he has 5 championships, and I know, how great of a player that he was. But this is what I'm talking about, that people have really poisoned, the NBA has really poisoned the people's minds, the media. Because my whole thing, in my opinion, is why I feel Kobe's ahead of Magic Johnson for this simple reason, is because, again, he's a better two-way player. He can do more. He had probably just as many accomplishments as Magic Johnson. I know Magic had the MVPs over Kobe, the 3 MVPs, and 3 Finals MVPs, and then Kobe had the 2 Finals MVPs, and then Magic had the 3 Seasons MVPs, and then Kobe had the 1 MVP. I know all that. And let me just make this point again. When Kobe Bryant has been robbed for 2 MVPs, you can make that case. In 2009, 2010, like I mentioned, LeBron James was supposed to match up with Kobe Bryant in those 2009, 2010 NBA Finals, but the problem was that LeBron James kept getting knocked out. Right? He kept getting knocked out. And in a couple interviews, they actually stated with LeBron James saying that he felt that Kobe Bryant was the best player in the NBA those 2 seasons. But they still gave the MVP to LeBron James in the season. I don't put a lot of stock into the MVPs anymore because it doesn't tell who the best player is. The only reason that we put so much stock in it is because they get an award for it. The NBA doesn't give the award for the best player. They give the award for the MVP. But I don't ever say, okay, this person has 3, this person has 2. Automatically, that's just such a big deal. I mean, to me, again, MVP just goes to a person who had a great season. But it's so objective that is so subjective that you can't really even put so much stock, because it seems like to me the narrative continues to change, and there's always a storyline attached to who gets the MVP. The only way I can determine who's the best player, you have to play it out. And those 2 years, again, Kobe Bryant played it out, and they won those 2 championships. But going back to Magic, I feel a lot of times we rank Magic Johnson with a curve because he's a likable person. Because if you look at just who the individual player is to Kobe Bryant was just able to do more. I always choose the better two-way player over the better one-way player who can pass the ball. You look at the history. You look at Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson. Michael Jordan was able to beat up Magic Johnson because why? Michael Jordan was the better two-way player, vice versa to Magic Johnson being the better one-way player. You look at last year with Kawhi Leonard and Luka Doncic. Kawhi Leonard took out Luka Doncic down the stretch in those big moments because he was the better two-way player, while Luka Doncic was the one-way player who can just, score and pass. You look at Giannis Antetokounmpo to Chris Paul. Giannis Antetokounmpo was the better two-way player to Chris Paul, who was a better one-way player, who was the point guard that can pass. So you always choose the two-way player over the one-way player. The elite two-way player over the elite one-way player. That's how I always do. You look at the championships, they have the same amount of championships. The dominance was just equal. So they're pretty similar, but I give the edge to Kobe Bryant for that simple reason. Like I said, Kobe Bryant wasn't the most likable person. Magic Johnson was a lovable person. You couldn't find a person who had nothing bad to say about him. So you got people trying to rank that person in because of that one key component, because he's likable. No matter what nobody says, majority of us, we rank our players that we like. If you're asking for people to be real and honest, you're not going to find too many people who are going to say, oh, well, I'm going to put Kobe Bryant because I know he's better, even though I love Magic Johnson more. They're going to give Magic Johnson a curve. But I just don't understand, putting Magic Johnson over Kobe. Actually, I do understand, but I don't understand when people act like Kobe has no business being in the top 5 when you can put LeBron and Magic Johnson and Larry Bird in there. Okay? Now let me get to the last person, LeBron James. Look, LeBron's going to be the guy they're going to try to use stats for as the reason why he's in the top 2 or top 3. Because my whole thing is and it gets weirder and weirder as his career gets, longer and longer. They're doing a great job of trying to integrate LeBron as it's just him and Mike. Like I said, the number one thing I look at when I rank these players is your championships and how many times you lost in the finals. And we know LeBron's record, what it is, at 4-6. So how am I supposed to put him over guys who have winning records who led their teams? Like they're trying to make it seem like it's just Michael and LeBron and then nobody else. And the reason his whole case is gonna be stats. Even though we're in a totally different era, and that's why I gotta tell you again, in a totally different era when the ball is dominated by LeBron James on every team that he's on, and you had guys who actually played in systems such as Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan to even a degree, who actually had to play in certain systems where they didn't have the opportunity to dominate the ball as much as LeBron James did. But where they're going to run with that narrative, like this is the reason why LeBron James is in the top 2 because of the stats that he had. I don't look at stats as one of the top 3 components. Like I said, I look at your championships, your dominance, and your accomplishments. Then stats come later. He has 4 MVPs. Like I said, 2 of those MVPs, just in my opinion, and what LeBron James said out of his own mouth, Kobe Bryant was the best player in the NBA those 2 seasons that he won. And I look at all the failures he had with all the help he had around him. And let me go back to Magic on this point too, why I put Kobe over Magic, because Magic Johnson, the help that he had playing with arguably the best team of all time, that 87 Lakers team, Kobe Bryant has never had a team as stacked as Magic Johnson did. He's never had a team as stacked. What Kobe had was a dynamic duo with Shaquille O'Neal and Pau Gasol, but he never had a full team around him at the degree of a Magic Johnson. And just to be quite honest with you, not to get off track, but a lot of times when Kobe was going through that drought, they failed to get a team around Kobe Bryant. And even with all that, he was able to take that team in a loaded Western Conference in 2006 and 2007 to the playoffs with Smush Parker and Kwame Brown and Brian Grant and guys like that representing his team. He was able to take them in a loaded Western Conference. So I look at all these components when I talk about, who's the best player. And if you want to put certain guys over Kobe, fine. But don't tell me that this dude has no business being in top 5, not even conversations. But guys like Larry Bird, LeBron James, Magic Johnson, they automatically get in. I don't want to hear that, because I'm going to ask you the question, why? And when I ask why, most times people can't even give me a straight up answer. They always beat around the bush. They talk about everything that player did, but they don't talk about everything that Kobe did. They don't compare. They try to, use false narrative. They try to use the whole Shaq argument, even though I shut that stuff down when I said Kobe had one more championships, and the production needs with Shaq, he pulled his own weight. Now the whole argument now is his efficiency numbers, and I just knocked that down too because of the shot selection. That's never been a key component of how we rank players, but we're trying to use it now because we're trying to take away stuff from Kobe Bryant. They got to stop this disrespect on this dude's legacy, man. They got to stop this, because if you're talking about just by skills and abilities and what he can do on the court, Kobe Bryant's a top 3 player. Just by looking at this list of what he can do, everything on the court. He's right there with right below Michael Jordan. And if we're talking about skills, Kobe Bryant is as skilled as Michael Jordan. He's not better than Michael Jordan, but he's more skilled than Michael Jordan. I don't want nobody trying to take my words and run with it. I'm saying he's more skilled. So if you add all those components in, championships, accomplishments, dominance in his era, the amount of help that he didn't have compared to these other guys, and was able to still get 5 championships, his skills and abilities, he's a top 5 player. So I'm sorry, this video was a little bit long, and I apologize, but I had to get all that stuff out. They really need to find a new hobby other than continue to hate on this dude's legacy. They're going to continuously with these bogus lists. But the real basketball players and hoopers understand what Kobe was and where he should be properly ranked. I have no problem anybody put him in the top 5, top 10. But just make a good, compelling argument, because I can't put 5 players in front of Kobe Bryant. So that's all I got to say about that. Continue to like, share, subscribe all our YouTube videos. You know what I'm saying? Pull up a seat, pull up a chair, pull up. Peace. Out of here like swim well.